So thank you for joining us on the panel and welcome to all of you. So let me start with Imrana without further ado. And I would like to really know because digital is now no longer something, which is out there with an IT department or with somebody, doing something in the corner. It's cutting across. And that's why we are having this HR panel. So how is at Asian Paints, digital transformation or digital really making a change? What are the kind of things that are affecting you as a company and how you are taking it forward?
So thank you for starting off with that interesting question, because I think the fact that you have invited the HR panelist here to talk on this subject itself echoes that sentiment that it's no longer a role of a particular function, but it's actually the whole organization in totality. So HR has a big role to play in upping the digital quotient within the organization and partnering with other business stakeholders, other functions in making it happen. There's a huge opportunity that is sitting, but in this opportunity, if the talent is not able to optimize the potential of this opportunity, or if the strategy is not in place, or the technology or adoption and the change management that's required doesn't happen, then the ROI is not something that gets achieved. So I would like to give a few examples on how we are kind of addressing this within Asian Paints. So the recent addition to our HR family has been the policy bot, and we call this policy bot Jarvis. And Jarvis got created after a lot of work. So obviously we had to teach Jarvis about 1,000+ questions to, when it started, facing employees. And within just 3 months, we have about 35,000 queries that have reached Jarvis. And also there are unique users, 1,200+ unique users. Interestingly, employees are comfortable reaching out to Jarvis even on weekends. So that's one thing that we have been able to do. Apart from that, we have used the IBM Watson and basically tried to create external sources of information and internal sources of information in order to make the right purchase decisions within the sourcing team. We also have created, using virtual reality, in the capability building domain, we have been able to get the participants more closer to the waterproofing requirement of different surfaces. We are also experimenting with many other formats where we can use virtual reality. So I think there are huge opportunities that are all around us, but trying to ensure that the talent is ready to seek its complete potential. And the large amount of data that we are creating, almost doubling of data happens every 8 months. So how do we maximize usage of this data is something that we are constantly asking ourselves.
Right. It's interesting that a paints company is talking of all these initiatives, and traditionally, because what we have seen in the experience is that some of these organizations, industries are considered a little behind. So let me move to one of the forerunners, which is the banking industry, and Harleena is with us. So what can you say in this context in terms of, obviously, banking, we have all seen the impact it has had. But in terms of the HR function and how it is, really taking it forward, if you can share some insights there.
Right. So thanks for having me here. Before I go to the bank, I want to tell you my own little story.
Sure.
I am an HR professional, but I'm not a pass out of XLRI or TIS or any of those holy meccas and grails of the HR academia. So I started my career in sales, which was fine. About 15 years ago, I moved to HR, and I grew fast, but then I hit a dead end. And the dead end was that I wasn't a blue-blooded HR professional. I don't know ER, and I didn't have a network of XLRI colleagues and friends. Now, when all things being equal, this was becoming a stumbling block. I knew, this was about 5 years ago, saying this is the time either I have to break out of the pack or continue to live and fight in the red ocean. And I tried looking around to find a blue ocean. Blue ocean, you know what that is, right?
Right.
No sharks, open out there. And I said, all right, I will become the best person there is, HR person, in the digital space, in the social media space. So 5 years hence, I'm very happy to say that I'm kind of almost there. And guess what? I get called and I am able to make a difference and use technology and digital and social to make deep impact to our brand, our organizational brand. So I tell you the story to say that this is pretty much also a mindset that we're building in our workforce. And that's my key role also at the bank. I'm a chief culture officer and a chief culture capability person. But culture for us means building, I was hired to do that, build a digital mindset. The bank said we are going to put digital processes and technology and micro ATM and macro ATM and all of that. But all that is not really unless the digital adoption happens, the digital mindset happens. And implementation is pretty much incidental, or it will happen by and by. So the culture, my key job as a culture officer of the company is to build a digital mindset. So that's the journey that we are on. That is a deeper journey for us,
in fact,
of
that's
culture.
very interesting to know, the role that you are playing. And like, Leslie and the speakers before also said, it flows from the top, and it's true of the organization as a whole, as well as the function as a whole. So if you have more socially active leaders, so typically one thinks of HR as some guy, moving files on you, hiring people or doing certain things. Like, so Mahalakshmi is already laughing, so I'll come to her. So let me now move to Anirudh. Again, he is from a traditional, so-called traditional industry, which is GMR Group, into infrastructure. So what do you have to say, sir? Can we have the mic on? You can use that mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I can give assurance to Harlina that she is not alone in the HR fraternity with the kind of background that she has. You can look me up in LinkedIn and see my background as well. Let me come to GMR Group. GMR Group is today a 12,000 crore company. Most of you have traveled through Hyderabad Airport and Delhi Airport. You would know about what GMR has created over the years. We have power plants and we have highways. We have about 5,000 employees. And being if you may say, a brick and mortar company, it has been a huge shift for us to change over from something which we were doing traditionally to what we are doing currently. About a year back, we had about 14% of our employees who didn't have dedicated desktops and laptops, and therefore they didn't have access to HR services. What we did is, in the last 9 months, in breakneck speed, we moved all our HR services, hire to retire, onto the cloud. That has created a significant amount of excitement across the organization. We have those 14% people being able to access all HR services through their smartphones. Apart from that, what has also happened is that in the process, we have dusted our HR processes of the last 15 or 16 years. We have tried to simplify many of them. We have tried to tweak many of them, change many of them, remove many of them, and created a few of them. So in that sense, I think there's been a huge, huge transformation in terms of the way we are running our HR processes now. It has brought its own challenges. It has brought its own excitement, as I said earlier. Huge amount of innovation has also happened. We've been able to involve a lot of young people into this whole ideation process, and which we can talk about later if I'm given the opportunity. Right. So that's where we are. Entire HR processes in the cloud. Apart from that, the procure-to-pay processes have been completely automated with the workflows. And now we are going into a different kind of a platform for our travel management services. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Anirudh. And it is always nice to have, different perspectives. So let me now move on to Mahalakshmi and, really ask her how does she, and she's with Mondelez, which is better known by Cadbury. So how do you sweeten the digital deal for employees, if I may ask?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, before we get into employees, perhaps, it's important for us to know why the hell are we suddenly going digital, yeah. And I think the realization really is that, to the point that, Devdeep and, his colleague spoke about rural India. So I used to work with a telecom company before I, joined this company, which really creates moments of joy, as we call it. And I think it's a big myth that, it's funny how much telecommunications and gadgets have penetrated, So apparently there was a big consulting house who went and told the promoter of the past, organization I worked with that, by the year 2020, India would have so many. But Actually, in the year that I left, which was 2.5 years ago, the maximum revenue generating circle was Bihar, you know, and rural was generating much more revenue through SIM cards, and the ARPU used to be really, really high on data. So the biggest data consumers were sitting in rural India listening to music. Okay, and all kinds of regional, local music and entertainment. And there was one called Faith, which was really bhajans and artis and, you know, live streaming of Tirupati puja, etc. So the consumer today is consuming digitally everything, you know. And I think the wake-up call is to say, folks, if we don't wake up to the fact that over a period of time, and I can speak for Mondelez, over the last 3 years after my joining, the percentage of revenue that's coming in from newer channels is actually growing 3x. So it's in hundreds, it's 3-digit growth versus traditional trade, which is growing at a certain percentage. So that's pretty much the business case of, you know, why the hell are we talking and getting into so much digital. Interestingly, Mondelez today, 40% plus of our colleagues are millennials, you know, and now chunk of them, we don't need to train on digital, right? They're born. My son at 8 years was kind of sitting and, you know, he could open a gadget and no training required. Like no one trained us on Facebook. We just intuitively know how to operate.
So that makes your job easy, right?
Yeah, but equally, perhaps I think the magic is, and I think the role that we've begun to play, and I'll perhaps stop with that, is understanding how we can use the power of digital in ensuring not just that we get business going to the consumer who's consuming digitally and therefore all the new channels, but ensuring that I use that to really rethink who's my workforce. The workforce needn't be sitting in my office where I have 4, you know, buildings, but actually some of my global workforce could be sitting working from anywhere, any part of India, and that's true today for us. I love the example that Harleena gave, because actually for someone who's learning hungry, I don't need to do a learning program and a training program when people say, chalo break mil gaya, let's go eat samosas, right? A person who genuinely wants learning can access that content anywhere, and we're just making it available just in time when they need it. And today, I don't need to, as HR, be considered, oh, a policy change, we need to go and ask. So there is we have a GRU, you know, like you said, Imran, like the bot. So GRU answers all my queries on policy, but a new policy change, I can crowdsource by my soapbox. Mrs. We are wondering if flex working is working. What are some of the things that's working, what's not? And people kind of anonymously feed in whatever they want, and the cloud pattern tells us, hey, here's what we need to do. So the possibilities are infinite, but it's as good as we make it, is perhaps the only message I'll have.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts. And let me have some analyst perspective from Alok. In terms of, you know, obviously, I'll throw just 3 keywords at you. Digitally responsive workforce. It's a very loaded, you know, statement in that sense. So what have you seen in your experience, either in your company or working with other companies, from the point of view of CHRO role and how the HR function is really impacted and, you know, changing by in digital?
You know, the perspective that I would like to bring in is from the HR analytics perspective. And, you know, when I started looking at the HR analytics, you know, there is inherent contradiction in the way that you look at HR analytics. You know, one reason is that when we think about individuals, we like to believe that, you know, every individual is unique, the capabilities that they bring, the approach they have towards work. And if you were to go with that approach, it means that, you know, everything that you do for the employee has to be customized, it has to be unique for that employee. Simultaneously, when we were to look at the employee as a group, as aggregates, there's a lot of insight that can be gleaned out of looking at employees as an aggregate and, you know, what's happening, what are they doing, and, you know, what kind of signals they give, and how organizations, you know, how they kind of also kind of going back to organizations say that, you know, here is the kind of changes that you need to bring. The second aspect is that when we take a look at employees from an HR analytics perspective, there are roles which are more amenable for analysis and there are roles which are more difficult for analysis. For example, when you take a look at employees who have sales roles, you know, the output that they produce itself is a very good signal for doing any analysis on what they're doing. The other roles which are not inherently amenable for the kind of analysis that you would do for those employees where you have some output output being generated. So that's kind of second kind of challenge that you face when you take a look at the employees. But the great thing is that, the shift towards data and the shift towards a recognition that, you need to organize the data. And that data need to be in a form that is open for analysis, is open for, is analytical data.
So any analysis as good as the quality of data.
That's right. And I think there's been a good shift, and this is happening both from the IT perspective as well as business leaders, HR leaders recognizing that we need to have our own data set. So I think, the fact that, these data sets are getting collected and, the marketing experiments that are happening. So
and what I can get is, what probably you want to suggest is that they need to get deeper into the role-based analytics and, spread it more deeper in terms of really finding out what is
and we
happening.
also have longitudinal data, so you can track individual performance for a longer period of time,
Right.
and draw inferences from them that can then lead to better performance. So I think that is something that's very exciting.
Right. So let us take this thread in terms of what is it that you are doing in the HR function. You mentioned Jarvis already, but would you like to share something else, Imrana, in terms of how does a paints company, for example, really think of virtual reality, Jarvis, and all those things, and what are the kind of tools that, how do you kind of put in place a process to have the right tool for the HR? How do you do that?
So one thing that I would like to clarify, that Asian Paints as an organization is no longer a paint-only company.
Absolutely.
We are in the space of
You're
home decor.
Right.
And hence, the first IBM mainframe in Asian Paints was got in 1972. So we had the advantage of making investments early on in the innings, and that has always helped us. So our investment in technology has always been something that we looked at from a long-term perspective. And I think in times like this, when everybody wants to be running faster, this pays back better. So there is a bit of technology as a differentiator, philosophy that has been adopted by the organization, and it's something that gets reflected in all parts of the organization. But since we are talking within the HR and the people space, I would talk about the fact that cognitive computing is a huge opportunity that we've kind of just touched on the surface, and we feel that there's a lot that we can do in this space, whether it is attracting talent, using it as a candidate advisor, using it for retention, doing sentiment analysis on engagement, trying to create unique learning paths for people in development, having a career coach, having in terms of lot of policy bots, not just Jarvis that answers static policy questions, but can Jarvis be expanded to become like a career management tool? So there's a lot of opportunity that's available with cognitive computing. And we do want to kind of move forward in this journey. Recently, I think Deepak from IT somewhere, our IT team is over here. So they had an IT conference and we had a hackathon that we had organized for our in-house employees. And in just a very short, I think 3 or 4 or a week's time, the team has actually created how we can leverage technology in the cafeteria space. So they said you can take pictures of food that you are consuming. It counts the calories, and you can instantaneously say, on my thali, the dal was not good, the salt was less, or I would like it more spicy, and the feedback instantaneously goes to the cafeteria manager. So over a period of time, you are able to kind of improvise on the cafeteria offering. So I think the world is getting away from a menu-based option. People would want to have more and more personalized and customized option. And they would want you to predict what your requirements are and actually proactively reach out to you rather than reactively respond to you.
See, the expectations are certainly
absolutely rising, and I think so are the expectation of employees, and we do have a lot of room. I mean, for example, the engagement surveys from the annual engagement survey model, today most of the people wear Fitbits and are very health conscious. So wellness is another space where we can use technology technologies. Employee wellness is a huge agenda that HR is trying to work on. So how can we leverage technology? How can we really meaningful make a difference in the well-being of our employees is another space that we can do some work. And lastly is knowledge management. Instead of relying on individual brains, how can we leverage on the collective enterprise brain? How do we create that collective enterprise brain? And we all know that employee life cycle is getting shortened within organization. So in spite of the changing dynamics of the employee work population, how do you ensure that the cognitive intelligence of the organization resides within the enterprise? Right. So these are some facets where we can do some more work.
So yeah, interesting thoughts, and I can see that you're already using a lot of tech jargon typically used by the technology function. So there's some cross-pollination happening there already. So your thoughts, Harleena?
So I'll try and give you a different perspective. I'm aligned with the NASSCOM Skill Advisory Council as well. And I worked for many years in the ITS industry. 50% of young India is going to face unemployment in next 2 to 3 years unless something dramatic happens. So NASSCOM is a consortium of 2,500 companies. It has put together many learning leaders, I'm one of them in that, to figure out what do we do. So far, India was all about labor arbitrage till about 5-10 years ago. Last 7-8 years ago, we started to move into the knowledge services. But even that is undergoing disruption now because of this technology which is coming in. So 2,500 companies have gotten together and saying, these are the 9 IT skills that we need to teach young India. And these are big numbers. We're talking about 300-400 million people. Cloud computing, cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality. So many brains at a corporate level in HR have come together with the technology company, experiences company, platform company to provide these learning paths and content for 2,500 NASSCOM member companies. So that is how many of us are beginning to think about the impact and the job protection, so to say. The other data point, personal data point for all of us here, the data says 70% of the money that we are spending on children to put them through colleges and schools are for the roles which aren't going to be there by the time they pass out.
It's very ironical.
Correct. So that's another something for us to think about, and many of us are doing that.
Yeah. So Anirudh, what would you like to say?
When we embarked upon this journey of rapid digitalization of our organization, we were also very conscious of the fact that where we were at that point of time. The fact of the matter is that about 27% of our employees were 30 years or less, but many of them seem to be consumers of certain very popular applications and apps and stuff like that, but the fundamentals of digitalization were somewhat not so much there. Apart from that, we have now 73% of our employees who are 30 plus, and there too, there is a certain amount of disconnect out there as to what is the meaning of digitalization and stuff like that. So what we did is that we started a digital literacy program across the group. Today, as I speak, 84% of our employees are covered. This digital literacy program consists of a 4-hour classroom training program which is mandatory for every employee to go through. After that, they have an 8-hour online program that they have to go through. That is something through which we are trying to bring about a groundswell of support and consciousness and understanding of what digital is all about. Without that, our belief is the whole initiative of digitalization will not be sustainable. The second thing that we have done is a top-down approach through which, as I told you, we have put in a lot of digital initiatives in place. But the top-down approach takes into account significant amount of syndication across the group. That means we have cross-functional teams for different initiatives that we have. Various immediate stakeholders within the group are consulted. We have vigorous discussion, debate, and then only we launch a specific program. This is supported by a think tank. We have a think tank of external, eminent, international people who have tremendous knowledge and pedigree of digitalization. These provide support to us in terms of quarterly meetings with our group holding board. So we have a three-tier program. We have the group holding board being advised by external advisors. We have cross-functional teams working actually on the ground in implementation of digital HR initiatives. And then we have this digital literacy program which is running across the group. So we hope that with this three-tier program, we shall be able to bring about fundamental changes in the way we work, we think, we need to work for the future. However, there's one more thing I think all HR people would be concerned about, is the fact that when we have rapid digitalization taking place in a community, an organization consists of a group of people, a community, it is important that we don't leave people behind. What I mean by that is we have people, and we know that younger people who are supposed to be digital natives and they're digital immigrants and digital refugees, but how is it that we can bring the digital refugee into the fold, and how not to have a widening digital divide? And that is the reason why we have gone through this program right now.
That's quite wide-ranging, and you do take a lot of initiatives in that sense. But how do you really measure, or because one thing about training that I've seen is that it may be given, but learning may not happen. So in the sense that how do you kind of ensure that the results are there?
Yeah, so as I said, this the digital literacy program is mandatory. Everyone has to go through it. Second thing that we have done is the online modules that they have to go through. These online modules have been designed in such a way that there is a scoring at the end of the online module test. So they have to pass through that test and there's some marks which come out, and those marks automatically come and hit our
is this tied
portal
to somehow
ourselves.
their performance or some benefits or whatever?
So now what we have done in terms of performance management, this is becoming a one goal sheet item that they have to compulsorily go through and qualify. That's very important, and this is going to be an interesting journey, by the way, because we have not done it before, frankly. This is a new thing that we are doing. Obviously, as you can understand, there are people who are responding differently to this initiative.
Right. So I think that's a challenge. Fortunately, you have more millennials and younger people, and the kind of initiatives that you take are different for different people. Alok also mentioned that. So building further on that in terms of what is it that you think can be done more, or how do you kind of really measure the results of your digital initiative? What are the thoughts that come to your mind?
So perhaps I'll share two examples, and I think the first important journey that we've been through is really reflecting on what do we want out of technology, because actually it can do anything and everything depending on how much you invest and what all you decide to use it for. If I want, I can actually measure unleashment every day, and engagement scores every day, but do I really want it, So I think really saying what is the priority and the critical stuff that we want technology to deliver for us, and how do we really leverage analytics where the bang for buck is maximum, So if I really, really want to understand retention, okay, so how do I really predict, how do we do predictive analytics around where is engagement going to go down and why, If there is a pattern to what kind of profiles are succeeding at Mondelez. So I think we've been very choiceful on where to utilize technology. And of course, we're also very conscious, and we're realizing that analytics is as good as data that's fed in, So if data input is not good, the best of technologies would fail. So it needs initial discipline, but I think infinite possibilities, and I think the leadership table really sitting together to see where do we prioritize has been a big learning. Second is really, so I mean, I wouldn't say, so I keep saying 40% of our organization is millennial, but what it also means is 60% is not millennial.
That's
yeah.
true.
So I mean,
So
I wouldn't say that, yeah, it's relatively more balanced, but I think, so we have a very contrarian and a different approach than, and each to their own. So our approach is not really to mandate any digital learning at all. It's almost like saying no one mandates me to breathe, right? If I have to, survive, I got to breathe, yeah? So I think what's really happening is, for most of our work, for most of our consumers and most of the stuff that needs to get done, it's already moving towards digital. So automatically, people veer towards, what we've done is we've made learning available, and we've created an ecosystem wherein whenever I want to learn, I can learn. So whenever the penny drops on me that, damn, I mean, I just don't know how to use this system, and without this, I cannot get this, analytic
But
out.
sorry for playing the devil's advocate, but
Go
at the
for
same
it.
time, left to their own devices, sometimes,
Yes.
different
I'll
people
come to
may,
that. I'll come to
and
that.
the CEO, the digital CEO or the digital board or whatever, they may want to move at a certain pace. And
Absolutely.
they talk of digital culture of the organization. How do you
So I'll just come to that. So I think there are three simple things that we've done. One is we've made all these learning opportunities available at the time, just in time, whenever you want it. So it's available perpetually. You just hook in when you want. Two, we are a big fan of reverse mentoring. I think humility to know that I learned from someone who knows this better, not necessarily someone who's senior in the hierarchy is now getting embedded into the culture. Starting with me, my CEO, all of us have mentors who are from a different generation. And I think the third really piece is we are conscious that after making everything available, after ensuring that potential assessment happens by your ability, your learning agility, there may be some who take some time, and that's where we kind of come in and suggest help. We suggest and connect them to mentors.
Right.
We create communities of joint learning. So it's not a mandate that you got to go learn this, but here is a time when we can sit together and chat about what are we struggling with, and the solution may come from someone sitting next to me, or someone who joined the organization yesterday, for whom this is like an equally, the other person can treat that new joinee some other stuff, around maybe managing a matrix, which has nothing to do with digital. But there is an ecosystem that's created of learning from each other without a push.
Right.
It's more driven by pull. I think that's the slight difference.
So that's fair enough. So let me ask Alok in terms of, can analytics or any other technology for that matter help a company really track and, really increase this engagement and, make the digital culture more pervasive in the organization?
Well, I think, the interesting point, I'd just like to recapitulate the perspective that Mahalakshmi brought and Aniruddha brought, was that, either it could be mandated, it could be, am I audible? Yeah.
It's slightly.
Either it could be mandated by the organization, which means there's a structure that is being put behind, or it could be, the structure itself could be spontaneous. It could be something that allows for informal network in the organization to leverage the informal network. And both of them are mutually complementary, and my guess is that in most of the organizations, both of them would be kind of working in parallel. They would be working in tandem. Now, coming specific to the question that you asked, if you were to take a look at the digital literacy, it's already, we are, for the fact that you talked about your children knowing about how to play with the tablet. Okay, we already kind of acclimatized to some part of it. It's kind of already built into our intuition. What organizations can do is, given that fact that there's a seed that's already seeded there, how can you kind of leverage that, and how can you extend that and make it more participative for individuals to play a role into, or kind of become more, imbibe that digital culture and be part of a digital citizen in an organization. Though I would also like to extend that by saying that when you take a look at analytics, and we have to think about HR organization itself as an entity that is consuming a lot of data, is generating a lot of data, and they can certainly elevate their own level of analytical thinking when they take decisions. Okay, and that is where I think the approach that Aniruddha talked about, where they, because the quantitative part doesn't come automatically. It doesn't come intuitively in the way that digital skills come to us. And that's the reason why I think that, having a specific module where managers and supervisors get trained into the analytical frameworks and use them for decision making.
Right.
I think that is something that
I think the takeaway I would say is kind of digital empowerment, that such tools or analytics can enable across the organization. So I think we should maybe open the audience for the for questioning. Any observations? Yeah, please. Yeah.
I don't know whether I think this is echoed by all my HR colleagues out here. But there is a thought which comes in my mind through this whole journey of rapid digitalization. The thought is about the role of HR in this whole, whole situation, and the role of the non-HR people. What I observe is that because of making HR processes and systems and service delivery easily available to the larger audience, that means to the managers and subordinates across the group, there is significant amount of independence that we give to them for them to dispense HR issues and HR processes and systems. So what I feel is that there is a necessity now to do two things. One is to educate and develop non-HR people on HR issues, because they may have a great tool in terms of digital HR, but is it something that they would be able to wield and utilize well and judiciously with wisdom? So that is something which we are thinking about. And the other thing that we are thinking about is that of the HR people themselves. How are they going to adapt their own role in the organization in the new digital environment? Because what is important is now much of their bandwidth is getting freed from mundane transactional activities, which are now expected to be done by the non-HR people, the larger audience. And what are they supposed to do in their free time? Are they going to spend more P-touch and try to meet up with people? At the end of the day, we are dealing with people. We are not dealing with machines. Are they going to spend more time with them? And if they have to spend more time with them, are they equipped to do that? Mm-hmm. Do they have the developmental needs taken care of for them to make meaningful contribution into the minds of the people which are there? So these are two thoughts that I have in mind. And sometimes, amusingly, many people say today that for a HR person to be successful, he or she needs to know some basics of statistics, because datafication of HR has become so widespread, it's very difficult to have an HR person out there without understanding of data.
Right. I think you are echoing similar sentiments here. So maybe we can have one or two quick questions from the audience, if we can have some mics. And anyone from the audience? Yeah, there's one gentleman here. Please, can we have a mic there? Please raise your hand so that he can reach. Yeah.
Hello. Good evening. I'm very happy I'm part of this. I'm Ramchandran from Ajinkya Devi Patil University. I handle the training and placements. I just want to ask, what are the 3 skills apart from being digitally qualified in the students that you look for in freshers?
Yeah, important question. So anyone can answer. Anyone on the panel can answer, or maybe. I don't think so. He is put to the panel, so anyone can answer.
It's an interesting question, and I would like to take the risk of giving my view. We go to campuses, and I think Asian Paints goes to campuses more often, and many of the others as well. But we have started going to campuses, and what I personally look at, and you might find it rather crazy, what I personally look at is to see if that person, if a particular boy or a girl has had a track record of having done something crazy. Having done something
out of the box.
completely different, completely out of the world. Something nobody would think of. That is number one. The other thing that I look at from that person is that if that person has followed a hobby sincerely apart from his or her studies and an academic pursuit. These are 2 things that I kind of look at, but anyway, there would be many other ways of looking at. Why I do that is because when I go to a college, I know they're academically good. I don't need to ask them questions about academics, how much they know about economics, how much they know about finance. They're expected to know it, and they have their marks to tell us about that. So what else do we ask? How do we differentiate? That's the way. So there are many other ways.
Anybody else? Yeah, Imrana.
So we hire at campuses for the organization and not for a given role. And hence, what we seek in is the basics like the attitude, commitment, passion. but more importantly, learning agility and adaptability. Because what we do is we give this fresh talent roles which are bigger than their shoe size. And for them to be able to run in that shoe size, we definitely look for learning agility and adaptability.
Thank you. So there's one more person, I think he wanted to ask some question.
Hello, this is Ramakrishna Parsekar from Vocat Corporate IT. I'd like to know from any of the panel members, what specific technology implementations have you done in your organizations to manage and measure employee engagement? You know, particularly we've had talks about anticipating exits and ensuring that employee does not get disengaged from the organization, and how to, you know, re-engage the employee back, particularly employees with niche skills which the organization does not want to lose.
Very important question. So Lakshmi, I think
I could take a stab at this. Okay, so I want to first call out that predictive analytics on retention, we don't necessarily base on unleashment or engagement. If I did that, and trust me, human beings are super smart, they will janmuchke go and rig the, you know, response on the unleashment so that they get that attention, so that, you know, people and leaders run after them to try and retain them. So no.
Hope they're not listening to you.
No, I mean, I'm very happy if they are. So I mean, in today's world, for all you know, this is getting tweeted somewhere and people are reading, right? So, so I want to let me respond to you, and therefore how. You know, I think there are three things. One, we do very serious action planning on engagement surveys, which are done not once in 2-3 years, but periodically. And that action planning is our commitment that when we hear your voice as colleagues, we work on it. Okay, so that's separate. Predictive analytics really says, is there a pattern to the people who've left in the last few years? Is it that they've been on the same role for the last 3-4 years? Is it that they've been, you know, highly paid, but they lack the potential to go to the next level? Is there a pattern in terms of life stage, you know? So marriage plus 3 years and they start thinking, you know? Is there a pattern to skill demand, supply, and let's take a competitor, you know, wanting to start a certain operation in the country, you know? So outside in and inside out, it's trying to see what is past data showing us, and therefore, it's literally statistics, as someone was saying, you know? If I extrapolate that data, who would meet a similar need? You know, now it is not 100% accurate, but it, to a fair degree of accuracy, shows you that perhaps here are 3-4 people you need to be a little more close to, so that as they start harboring these thoughts, you have proactively engaged with them, or you proactively thought about their next role, or you proactively conversed with them to say, hey, you know, here are some things we are doing for them. So that's pretty much what we do from a managing it perspective.
Right. Thank you. I think we are running a little behind time. So one last question, I think, this gentleman. And please, quick short one, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Himanshu. I'm from Fuzzy Logics, a big data team. My question is for Anirudh. So we're talking about digitally responsive workforce. What about the other side, digitally responsive employer? So would you allow your employees to come in, you know, a digital native employee? I mean, I have a team of which is pretty young. They sleep in office, they play in office, they come whenever they want, but they work really hard. So we allow them all kind of freedom. But for a large company, would you allow the freedom of to a 22-year-old to come with his iPad in shorts, in sneakers, and, you know, come at odd times and leave early when he wants? But I mean, still, as long as they are productive. So would you do that?
Yeah, it's working.
First question from my side is, why me?
I think he has deliberately picked on you.
I'll tell you why. Because you're the most brick and mortar of all others. So
okay. So just to reveal the secret of a brick and mortar company, we are pretty flexible on that. It all depends on the boss and the subordinate. If the subordinate says that I need to work 4 hours a day for the next 5 days because I have some difficulty at home, it's for the boss to just approve it. That's it. So nobody questions it. Nobody asks there is nothing about it. However, the policy doesn't talk about it. The policy is the same, the old stuff. But when it comes to practice, we practice it completely across the group like this.
Thank you, everyone. I think we need to close because the other program will get delayed. So I must thank all the panelists and all the audience for this, and I hope it was worth your while. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.